It's one thing to listen to doom and gloom about food and fertilizer shortages, skyrocketing prices, the cost of living, or your job being outsourced overseas or eliminated due to automation. It's quite another thing to hear practical, immediately actionable advice from experts who can help you reduce the fear, anxiety, and burden of these problems. Tune in now to the Surviving Hard Times podcast from the Finding Genius Foundation with Richard Jacobs. Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. I'm Richard Jacobs, Executive Director of the nonprofit Finding Genius Foundation and host of the Finding Genius podcast. In late 2016, I was rear-ended at 65 miles an hour by a truck on the highway, which sent me off-road into a ditch. The impact of the collision gave me a concussion and other injuries. At the hospital, a CT scan showed that I had thyroid nodules, which turned out to be cancer. It was then, when I had a biopsy of my neck, that I realized even if I was a millionaire, I wouldn't want a second or a third biopsy due to the pain and the invasiveness of it. And appointments at that time for thyroid experts were 3 to 6 months out, and I was worried about dying now, even if that was irrational. So because of this, I've decided to raise money to conduct a literature review on steroids, on the causes of anxiety and depression, a condition that affects well over 50 million people in the United States and hundreds of millions worldwide. Our goal is to create a codex, a guide that reveals all possible treatments for anxiety and depression for people that live with the condition, or for loved ones that have it, as my wife and my son do. To find out more about our fundraiser, visit findinggeniusfoundation.org and click on Current Initiatives. And now, to our guest. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Surviving Hard Times podcast, sponsored by the Finding Genius Foundation.
We've got a really great guest, Rob Greenfield. He's an environmental activist. He's got a YouTube channel, Rob Greenfield. His website is robgreenfield.org. So he's an activist and a humanitarian dedicated to leading the way to a more sustainable and just world. He's got a really fantastic YouTube channel with a lot of great information on, growing products, harvesting them, foraging, etc. So I just want to ask Rob about his activities and his channel and his lifestyle. So welcome, Rob.
All right. Well, good to be on with you, Richard.
Yeah, tell me first a bit about your background. What got you into, sustainable living and what you do today?
Sure. Well, to go back, I guess, really about 10 years ago, I was living the American dream that I thought, I was very much focused on material possessions and financial wealth. I had the goal of being a millionaire by the time I was 30. I was 25 at the time. And I was living a good life. I was enjoying it thoroughly and I was happy and healthy. But then something happened and I realized I had to really change the way I was going about life and really change my life goals. And what happened was I simply started to watch a lot of documentaries and read a lot of books and realized that almost every action that I was taking, food I was eating, the car I was driving, the trash I was creating, the junk I was buying, it was all causing destruction to the earth, to humanity, and to our fellow plant and animal relatives. And at that time, I just said, I'm going to change things around so I can be living in harmony with the earth.
Was it a growing, creeping realization, or was one day like a watershed moment where you changed everything?
It was definitely, I really fairly quickly realized that I wanted to totally radically transform my life. I very quickly started to see how much I had been lied to by corporations and by governments and by society. And so it wasn't overnight, but over a period of just a few months, I, realized more and more that this way of life that I was living was not in alignment with my beliefs. And I very quickly decided that I was going to turn things around. And so what I decided to do was that every week I was going to make at least one positive change. And with the idea, if I did that for 2 years, every week, one positive change, that's 100 positive changes over 2 years. And if you think about it, imagine if you woke up and you were doing 100 things differently tomorrow from today, it would be pretty like, whoa, who am I? What am I doing?
My wife would get a shotgun and be like, who are you?
Exactly. But by doing it one step at a time over a couple of years, I was able to pretty quickly transform my life to stepping away from destruction and living more in harmony with Earth, humanity, and our fellow plant and animal relatives.
Yeah, the reason I ask you is that I've thought about some things like that. Like, what if I gave away most of my possessions and just lived with very little? But a lot of that's very scary. So it sounds like you took a plunge that most people probably would find to be very scary. Like, how did you let go of your desire to make money and your lifestyle as it was?
Definitely. There definitely was some hopelessness and helplessness, and like, how can I possibly live in alignment with my beliefs when almost everything that I'm doing is destructive? So that's where, for me, what I decided was, by taking it one step at a time, I was able to just make little shifts, and it built my confidence. And I very early on had the dream of, like, can I exist without money? Like, how simple can I get my life to? Can I get my life down to just everything I own fitting in my backpack? But those bigger picture things, those took me years to get to. Like, by the time I simplified my life down to owning just 111 things, that was after 5 years of downsizing and simplifying, month after month and year after year. And so by doing it that way, it made it manageable. But also, for me, I want to acknowledge that it's a lot, I have a lot of privileges, and I didn't grow up really wealthy or anything. In fact, my mom made about $18,000 a year and had 4 kids with no dad. So I grew up, quite low income, but I still had a lot of privileges and a lot of skills as well, and a lot of free time and resources that allowed me to really be able to dive in. And also what people would call a safety net, like, not like big investments or anything, but I knew that there were people who cared about me, which changes things compared to some people. When they wake up, they don't have, a support system around them. So that was something that was also really, what made it possible. And just one other note on that, the whole idea was realizing the privilege that I had and saying to myself, I'm not going to take advantage of that privilege. I'm not going to live in a way where my joy and happiness comes at the expense of others. I want my joy and happiness to come in a way that actually uplifts others and is in service to Earth and humanity, while also finding more joy and more compassion and more meaning and purpose in life.
So what were some of these initial small shifts, and what were like some of the real major ones?
Yeah, well, some small ones were just like, for example, ditching the paper towels and the napkins and just using washable cloth towels, or getting rid of the toxic cleaning products and replacing it with simple natural products like vinegar, or getting rid of my Old Spice deodorant and realizing, actually, I don't even need deodorant. It's been 10 years without deodorant, and I have more friends than I did before when I wore deodorant. Small things like that, starting to walk a little bit more, starting to ride my bike a little bit more, and then a little further, and then a little further. And then some of the big things were, after about a year and a half, I actually got rid of my car. After 3 years or 4 years, I got rid of my cell phone and went cell phone free. After 5 years, I had no bills. Taking my money out of the big banks was a big step. That took like 5 years or so before I took my money out of Chase Bank and switched it to a local credit union. Removing all of my investments from my 401ks and all that were invested in fossil fuels and cigarettes. That was a bigger step for me. So all along the way, there were small, easy, manageable things that brought me more meaning and joy in life. And then there were bigger ones that were, sometimes scary, but by the time I got to the point where I was ready to do them, it wasn't really scary anymore, because I had thought about them for long enough, educated myself, learned the alternatives, and seen that I could do it.
When did you come to that point where you did, I guess it was a challenge to yourself to go a year and all the food that you would eat would be foraged? Is that correct?
Yes. So, from the early awakening in 2011, when I was 25, I'm 35 now. The big awakening was about our food, realizing that with every bite that I was taking, I was literally consuming the planet, that none of my food was giving back to the earth. It was pillaging the earth. And so early on, I did have the question, would it be possible to actually exist outside of this global industrial food system? Would it be possible to exist without this packaged food, this food that's shipped around the world, guzzling fossil fuels, these ingredients that I have no idea what they are? And basically, would it be possible to actually grow and forage all of my own food? And so that was a question I had from the very early start. But when I decided to finally give it a try was the end of 2017. So about 6 years after I initially started making changes. And I set out on a 1-year challenge, 1 year of growing and foraging every bite of my food, down to even the salt that I would put on my plate, the calories, the protein, the fat, the nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the medicine, everything for an entire year.
Wow, that's a tall order. Did you come up with that, or was that suggested to you? And then I want to ask you about that journey. What was that like?
Sure. I honestly don't always remember exactly where ideas come from. A lot of times it's brainstorming with friends. A lot of times it's me riding my bicycle. That's when I get really inspired. But I'm always bouncing my ideas off of friends. At the time, I was dating someone named Cheryl, and all of my ideas definitely were shared with her. And then I do know I was definitely inspired by people that were, not necessarily growing and foraging all their food, but people who were testing the limits. I read Animal Vegetable Miracle by Barbara Kingsolver. She did a similar year, but not growing and foraging everything. So the idea probably came a little bit from within myself, and then a little bit from many different sources around that I came across that inspired me.
So you forged the idea from other people and yourself.
That is a reasonable statement.
So what was that like? What was it like, day one, week one, month one, and then month 6, 7? What was that journey like for you?
Well, the first meal that I had on day one was the first meal of my entire life that was 100% homegrown and foraged. I dived into the deep end. I had been preparing for 10 months prior and learning so much. I had been growing food all over the neighborhood. I had 6 front yard gardens that I had started in other people's yards. I had mapped out where food was growing, where fruit trees were, and where the wild yams were growing. And, over the last 10 months, I had basically, figured out where the supermarket aisles were, but instead in the forests and oceans and, abandoned city lots and so on. So when I started on day one, I indeed had never taken the time to grow and forage an entire meal, but I had a lot of food growing and I had a lot of knowledge, and I had some food already stored away. And the beginning was tough, especially because I wasn't just doing this. I was running other programs like the Free Seed Project and Community Fruit Trees, programs to help other people with growing their own food and gaining food sovereignty. And I was also doing a lot of media. For the first 8 or 9 days, there was a media team from France there with me. And whenever you have cameras there, everything takes a lot longer. So it was a lot of late nights and a lot of work. But it was about 10 days in that I noticed a big shift in how I was feeling. Just about a week and a half of eating 100% homegrown and foraged food. And I noticed that my digestion was the best that it had been in my adult life. And definitely was feeling good. Well,
one second, quick question. When you first started that journey, how good were you eating? Were you standard American diet, or were you eating really clean at that point, even before you started?
I have always strived to eat, a lot, mostly unprocessed, unpackaged diet, or, I should not say always, but since I, started waking up and making changes. That being said, if I'm at a party and there's cookies and brownies, I try stopping me. I will eat so many of them. It's definitely a problem. And also because I was doing a lot of dumpster diving, I dumpster dive for food that's going to waste at grocery stores. And because I did
really? You got food out of. So I imagine you, again, with these gardens, just walking around neighborhoods, picking and all that, and asking people to eat their stuff. But you got food from dumpsters as well.
Not for the year, no. So.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, let's go back to the year. So you were eating pretty well, but eating this way was even better for you. You noticed the difference even so.
Yes, but what I want to say is that because prior I did a lot of dumpster diving, when I find a half gallon of still frozen ice cream in the dumpster, there's a good chance I'm going to eat it. So most of the food that I was buying was healthy, but I would find a dozen donuts in the dumpster, good chance I was going to eat it. So my diet was healthy, but it was by no means like pure.
You were part, eating the best you could ever eat, and part Oscar the Grouch, I guess.
Yes, although I will say that I can get the best that anyone can eat out of the dumpster as well, because it's amazing what's thrown away. But so, my health was definitely improving and I was feeling really good, as solid as I had in a while. And then about a half year into the project, I started to feel deficient. I was getting plenty of calories, plenty of greens like vegetables and fruits and, nutrients, but I was lacking in fat and protein. I was not having successful time fishing. I was eating a lot of coconuts and making coconut milk, a lot of coconut curries, but I just was not getting enough fat and protein and started to feel pretty deficient about halfway in. And that's when I managed to harvest some deer that were hit by cars. Some people would call them roadkill deer, but I call them deer that were hit by cars because they were a deer before they were hit by the car, and they're still a deer after they were hit by a car.
Okay. You weren't able to get like eggs from, people that had chickens or other sources of protein?
No, because I had to literally grow or forage 100% of the food myself. So I couldn't get chickens, eggs from somebody else. It had to be food that I actually grew. I wasn't, taking food from others or exchanging. And, interestingly, I'm actually always have been a good fisher person, but I was really not successful with fishing and ate a lot of coconuts, but that just wasn't doing the job, and a lot of beans, but it's a lot of work to grow and forage all your food. But basically the second half of the project, I managed to get enough protein, started to catch more fish. And I finished off the year having grown 100 different foods in my garden. I foraged 200 different foods from nature. There's over 300 different foods over the year. And I finished off weighing about the same as I had started and feeling the healthiest that I had felt my adult life. And I made it through the year without getting sick once. So it was a real beautiful example of letting your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food.
What did you do though where were you? Did you have to move around to get away from winter, or what did you do when it got cold?
Well, I lived for this project in Central Florida, and I chose that because I wanted to be as a new gardener and everything, to live in a year-round warm place, but also just on a personal level, I like to be in warm places. So I had the year-round growing season. That being said, a lot of people think that I could only do this because I was in a warm climate. And the reality is that the most abundance that I have ever experienced is in the northern climates in Wisconsin and New York and, Pennsylvania and all across the north. And the key is you just have to harvest the bounty through the summer and you preserve it. You dehydrate, you freeze, and then you have that bounty to eat all winter long.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, so as the year went on, you said you had some challenges, you overcame them, you felt great. What else did you learn from doing this year? Did you learn a lot at the beginning, or it was more towards the end, or, again, what else came out of it?
Well, the amount of knowledge that I gained through this is just, hard to speak upon. For most of us, we are so disconnected from our food. We don't know where it comes from, how it gets to us, what the impact it has on the earth. And I learned about every single ingredient that I needed in order to have a complete diet. I learned about the ecosystems that create this food. I learned about how to manage a garden in a sustainable way that actually regenerates the earth rather than depletes it. I learned that I could find food anywhere that I am, whether I'm in the city or the countryside, suburbs, or, downtown New York City. Wherever I am, I can find food growing freely and abundantly all around me. And I'm not currently growing and foraging all my food by any means, but every day, everywhere I go, I find food that's growing freely. And I, most days, enjoy some of that food straight from the earth.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, what other projects did you work on after that? I'm sure. Did you feel, I'm guessing, did you feel emboldened to all right, what else can I do now? Or you're like, I need a break and let me just chill out for a few months?
Well, by that time when I did Food Freedom, I had been doing my activism for a handful of years by then. And I've continued to do many different projects that are designed to, test my own limits, but also be, by doing so, taking people on a journey that helps them to sort of test the preconceived notions that we have about the earth and our relationship. And so I'm always, embarking on these projects that are designed to educate myself and grow skills within myself, but at the same time, take others along on this journey. And the whole idea is to get people to self-reflect, ask questions about their life, and if they don't like the answers to the questions, then learn about how we can change them, how we can live in a way that is in harmony with earth, and again with humanity and our plant and animal relatives. And so I've continued to do that. And after Food Freedom, I was actually on a world speaking tour, and that's when COVID hit. So I ended up just kind of bunkering down in southern France for 4 months.
Okay. I mean, but what's again, what other big projects like? So it sounds like you're always making changes, you're always trying things, you're always moving in a direction. So if we fast forward to today, how has your mission changed? What projects are you working on or want to work on at this point?
Sure. Well, what I've been working on primarily over the last about 2 years is a lot of community programs. So over the last few years, we've planted about 2,000 community fruit trees, which are fruit trees that are publicly accessible for anyone to enjoy the fruit from, and help people to see that food can be growing right in our front yards, in our parks, in our schools. It doesn't have to come from the grocery store. And also running the Free Seed Project. With that, we send out a seed pack that has about 20 varieties of seeds of greens, herbs, flowers, vegetables, enough to start a small to medium-sized garden. And we've sent those out to, is it 50,000 people about, or 30,000 people over the last few years. And then I've been running other programs as well. So that's really what's been a big part of my life over the last few years, has been running these programs. My next project actually is starting. My last project was, I was out in New York City in Los Angeles. And I did a project where for 1 month, I lived just like the average person, eating, shopping, consuming, just like so many people are used to. But with one big exception, I had to wear every piece of garbage that I created. The idea was to
you must have had like a bridal veil on a train 22 feet long of garbage wherever you went after a while.
Well, what I did is I had a specially designed suit made with clear pockets that were expandable, and it was very well built to be able to hold this weight on me. So every day I got bigger and bigger. The average US American creates about 4.5 pounds of trash per day, which is about 135 pounds per month, or close to 1 ton per year.
Cow. Jeez.
So I didn't create that much, but while living like the average person, I created about 2.5 pounds of trash per day. So by the end, I was wearing 72 pounds of garbage, whether I was, on Rodeo Drive or in Santa Monica at the beach or at the shopping mall or out on a date. Everywhere I went for the month, I was a walking billboard of how our consumerism really adds up.
Did people come up to you, like kids or adults, and ask questions, or what was people's reaction?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the reason I like that campaign so much is it's hard not to notice. It puts consumerism right in front of people, and it does it in a fun and interesting way. And so people would ask me often, "What are you doing?" And I would say, "Oh, I'm just living like the average person, but I'm wearing all of my trash." And people's jaw would drop. It started with curiosity and intrigue, and that would often result in just shock. It was a visual that helped them to really understand something that often they had never really thought too deeply about before. Because for most of us, trash is out of sight, out of mind. We just throw it in the garbage can and we never think about it again. And with me around on the streets, you had to think about your garbage if you saw me.
Yeah, that's crazy. Huh. I guess it's obvious that people create a lot of garbage and trash, but what hit home to you in doing that experiment? Besides, what I just said.
Yeah, I mean, it really was simple. I mean, I knew that that the garbage was going to be adding up and going into it, but it took a couple of weeks, and every single time I saw myself in the reflection of a window, I couldn't help but to see how absurd this was. And it was amazing how much the weight added up. And so I didn't just see the burden of our consumerism, I felt the burden of our consumerism with every single step. And I did a TEDx at the end of the 30 days. I timed it so that I could do a TEDx at UCLA. And so for people that would love to like see more of that project, you can search the TEDx. I wore all my trash for 30 days.
Did you wear it on stage when you did your TEDx talk?
Absolutely. That was the whole idea. I was on stage in the trash suit.
Did anyone ever think you were like a homeless person and kick you out of a place when you wore this?
A lot of people confused me for someone experiencing homelessness or someone, with a mental illness. It was like, because our trash is so out of sight, out of mind. And in our society, we often like try to push our problems to the curb and not see them. When we do see them, we're often confused. And so, in cities, often when people see garbage, it is sometimes, people who are experiencing homelessness who are going around and like collecting cans and things like that. So definitely people confused me with that. And, but when they would hear me talking, it was pretty amazing to see how some people went from disgust, like looking at me with disgust, you could see it, to all of a sudden being like, whoa, what is going on here? And then being like, whoa, this guy has a point.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. Wow. So these shifts you made, but I want to bring it around to another topic. So from what I've been hearing in the news all over the world, it looks like famine may be coming, unfortunately, for hundreds of millions of people. For people here in the U.S., small shifts can they make to help themselves going forward? Like, they may be afraid. I'm sure they are afraid that maybe they're worried about what's coming, but what are some like really useful, simple things that people can do to improving their lives in the way you did?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to go into that, what I like to really focus on is how can we improve our lives in a way that actually improves those around the world that have less than us. So many of us live lives where the reality is we have excess. We have everything we need and so much more. And when we look at that, when we start to look from a place of gratitude, we start to see that. And so what I really like to encourage people is to ask the question, yes, how can I improve my quality of life and do it in a way that is improving others as well? And, one of those is breaking free from this global industrial food system, because so much of the food that we're buying at the grocery store exists because of our pillaging of other communities. So looking at our food choices, and instead of buying food from these huge corporations that are causing destruction to the earth, putting our money and our time into local food systems. That doesn't mean we have to grow or forage it ourselves, but supporting the local farmers and gardeners who are growing food in a regenerative way. Starting to ride our bicycles a lot more and not be so dependent on fossil fuels. Simplifying our lives, asking ourselves next time we're going to get something, do I really need this or do I just want this? And the more that we simplify and the less we feel like we need this stuff from corporations, the more we can instead start to depend on our communities. That's another big part is becoming dependent upon our communities, learning what others in our community are doing, getting involved, sharing our skills with each other. Once we start to share our skills, we live in abundance. We don't need to send our money to these corporations because instead we can exchange our skills and our resources with others. So those would be, some of the things that I recommend to people in a way that, ultimately one little thing at a time is taking down capitalism and instead creating community-based systems locally that are empowering ourselves and empowering others.
Yeah, I saw in your bio that you haven't really, it looks like you haven't taken a vow of poverty, but you have something akin to that in terms of finances. What have you decided and what action are you taking? Before, at the beginning of the call, you said originally you wanted to be a millionaire by a certain age. So financially, what is your outlook and how have things changed for you?
Sure. Well, yeah. So I'm 35 now, and I have about $3,000 right now, I think, to my name. No bank account, no credit card, no investments or savings. My net worth, including all of my material possessions, is I'd say probably under $10,000 right now. And I've committed to making less than the federal poverty threshold financially. So not simulating poverty, just committing to make less than the federal poverty threshold, which for an individual right now is less than $11,000 per year. And a big part of that is I've committed to a lifetime of not paying federal taxes, because I'm not going to pay for our wars and police brutality and this inequitable distribution of these funds. Instead, what I do is 100% of my media income, so books that I write or TV shows that I do, is donated directly to nonprofit organizations, especially Indigenous and Black-led organizations that are, actually providing resources equitably to the people. And so I am in no way trying, by not paying federal taxes, it's not about not contributing. It's about finding a better, a way of contributing that more deeply reaches the people and is a part of actually healing our earth.
Well, I don't know if people have asked you, but how do you live on so little and still, and you're still happy, healthy, and doing whatever you like to do? It sounds like what are some of the big keys that really reduced your need for, a larger income?
Yes, absolutely. Well, number one is simplifying my life. The less that I need, the easier it is to meet those needs. So I have just so many of the things in the past that I thought I needed, I've downsized, I've simplified, and I haven't left a hole or a void inside of myself. Instead, I just found other ways to meet those needs. So I have a deep connection with the earth, and I can take joy and connection in the earth every day. I can grow and forage my food, which of course that can save you thousands of dollars a year. I ride my bike most of the places I go. As far as rent, what I do is I create relationships. So often what I'm doing is I do a work exchange for a place to stay. I do some work where we have a mutually beneficial relationship. And instead of it being a financial relationship, it's what needs do you have and what needs do I have, and how can we work together to meet each other's needs? So that's the other big part, is it's about community. So many people in my scenario would feel very insecure about the future. But I would feel very insecure about the future if my only investment was financial. I believe that financial investments are nowhere near as secure as relationships. So relationships with people, I build quality relationships with people where we will take care of each other, creating community. Relationship with the earth, knowing how the earth works and knowing how I can work with the earth. Relationships with animals and plants and fungi, mushroom relatives. I've eaten a lot of mushrooms over the last week, not hallucinogenic mushrooms, just delicious edible mushrooms that are healthy for me, all from earth that other people would be spending hundreds of dollars on if they wanted to. So it's about relationships. And then also all of this is about skills as well. Learning how we can meet our needs through our own physical hands and by teaming up with people in our community through the skills that we have to accomplish the things that we need to. Because humanity has taken care of each other long before there was any concept of money, and we can still do it today.
Yeah, that's excellent. A friend of mine named Miguel, he's ridden his bicycle, all throughout the U.S. for weeks at a time and slept in fields and stayed with people. And he's had a lot of cool journeys doing that. Have you done something similar where you said you ride your bike everywhere? So if you need to travel or if you want to travel to another state, do you fly or do you ride your bicycle?
Well, I do different things all the time, but I have biked across the United States 3 times. So I've done a lot of bicycling. Those were always campaigns of sustainability, but also just joy and living the life that I want to. I biked 30 miles today to get home. I was staying out in the woods and I had meetings today, including this podcast. But I do get in cars, definitely get into cars. Like when we did the project out in Los Angeles, we drove out there. However, I'm not currently flying. I fly pretty minimally, but currently, actually a new thing is as of 2 months ago, I no longer have a passport. I had already gotten rid of my driver's license and my birth certificate 6 years ago, and I just got rid of my passport. My driver's license and my social security card. I just got rid of my passport and my birth certificate, which means I no longer have any form of government ID, which means that if I wanted to get on a plane, I couldn't even get on a plane.
Oh, why did you do that? Why did you get rid of all those things?
Well, it is a part of breaking free from systems that I do not really support. It's about stepping away from government systems and creating my own systems that are in alignment with the earth. I don't believe that we need to be able to identify ourselves. I think it's a little absurd that we have to show a plastic card in order to prove who we are. Now, within the confines of our society, yes, there's a lot of elements that make sense with it. But on a bigger picture level, I want to see, can I exist outside of these systems? Can I simply exist as a human being? And so much of what this comes down to is I am seeking truth and I'm seeking a deep state of presence. And the more that I remove myself from all of these systems, the more that I can live just in this moment as a human being, a human animal. And that's really what I'm pursuing, is just trying to exist in a very, very simple way. And getting rid of those identifications in and of themselves would not accomplish that. But it's just one element of the many ways in which I have chosen to remove myself from systems that do not represent my beliefs and of how to live in harmony with this earth, and replacing them as much as possible with systems that are connected to this earth.
Wow. So what do long-term friends and family say about you? What have they noticed? I guess it took them time to get used to things, but I don't know. What are your interactions or relations? Again, family, friends, etc. now? How is it different?
Well, I would, my goal in life is to be very humble. It's definitely, it's a balance, because I'm talking about myself and what I'm doing. So it could definitely be perceived as ego based. And I do have an ego, and that's one of my, focuses in life, is reducing that ego and using it as a positive tool. So I'm saying that to say that most of my, family and friends, they take great joy in being family and friends with me. Like, me being around is often a moment where they're getting to learn and explore and look more deeply at life. And if I'm around, there's a good chance that they're going to be learning new skills, whether it's like the food that's growing in their yard, or, or their community, or teaching them how to grow food, or dumpster diving. So many of my friends have began that. So many people are waking up and they're wanting to be a part of the shift and the change. And so they, most all of my friends and family really enjoy being a part of this journey in a positive way. And a big part of that is that I don't tell anybody what to do. This is just my life, and I'm just showing people another way. But I don't tell anybody that anybody has to do anything. I'm just a positive example around people.
Oh, that's really cool. Have you seen, though, that, unintentionally, people have felt guilty because the way you live and they don't live that way? Like, are there any, I hope it's not too personal, but are there any friends or family that for some reason just they don't hang out with you much or talk to you much? Maybe they feel for some reason guilty about their own circumstance because of what you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. And it's, it's something that I have to be very conscious about. And I focus a lot on my relationships. They're very important to me. And so I'm constantly self-reflecting on my actions and how they impact the people around me. And so I've gotten better over time. To be honest, a lot of the times I'm not talking about what I'm doing with my family and friends. I'm just existing with them. I don't generally bring up what I'm doing. If other people are asking me about it, I talk about it, but rarely do I actually bring it up. But yes, people often, they feel different feelings around me, whether it's, anxiety, or whether it's something along the lines of not feeling like they're enough or they're doing enough. And, often that's not on me, that's on them. And I can't control anyone else's feelings. But sometimes it is on me, where I'm seeing the way that I'm interacting is not the most beneficial to those around me. And so it's something I've been constantly working on and constantly changing. But it is one of the challenges of my life. Like, people know I'm coming over, and they'll often hide the things that they feel guilty about if I'm around. And in a way, there's some positivity to that, because it means I'm making people think, and that's the whole idea. But it's definitely one of my personal struggles, because I don't want people feeling like they need to hide with me around.
Yeah. Well, what has been the most difficult for you in your journey over the past few years? Like, What's been some of the hardest things to wrestle with, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, well, I think the hardest thing is just the daily struggle. That society is not designed for me in the sense of the way that I want to live my life. Asterisk, it is designed for me in the sense that I'm a white man, and this is a society that's been largely dominated by white men and have, tried to design society to be of, design for them. So in a sense, it is designed for me. But in the sense that I'm trying to break free from this dominator type society and this type of society that takes what it wants from Earth and from others and from our plant and animal relatives, and instead be living in a way that our actions are in positive impact. Every day is a struggle because I'm trying to do things differently. Most of the food choices anywhere I go, not things that are for me. Most of the forms of transportation, not ones that I want to be taking part of. Most of the forms of entertainment, not ones that I want to be taking a part of. So it's a daily, every day I'm walking against the grain of society. And every day I have to hold strong. Having made these changes doesn't mean that I'm just like immune all of a sudden. These changes are changes that I need to continue with day after day through the struggle.
Okay. Well, very good. Rob, what are good ways for people to follow you and to find out what you're doing and, learn from you? Where can they go?
So my website's just robgreenfield.org, and you can find me on the social media and YouTube, but just by typing in my name. And the reason I use those social medias and the website is to put out information that's helpful to others, to help them be the change they wish to see in the world. My website has so many guides that I've written. My YouTube channel has so many videos that I've done that are really all about empowering others to be the change they wish to see, showing examples of other people out there that are doing it. So they're really great resources, for anybody who's listened to this and has and is inspired and is wanting to make changes, then those are going to be helpful resources.
Excellent. Well, Rob, it's been a great call with you, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Yes, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Hopefully one day we'll be able to share a moment in person.
Awesome.
Before you stop listening, ask yourself, what are 1 or 2 useful things you heard on this podcast that can help you overcome food and fertilizer shortages, skyrocketing prices, the cost of living, or your job being outsourced overseas or eliminated due to automation? Please like and subscribe and tell your friends and family about their Surviving Hard Times podcast. We're all going to need help now and in the near future.